Hi, guys. So, what we have here today are our notes on organ systems or the human body. So, what I'm going to do is I am going to go one by one through the systems. In class, this takes us a very long time to do, several weeks. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of combine it all together and do all of the systems all at once. So, you can come back and watch any portion of this if you miss any days of the notes. So here we go. Let's get into it. To start off with, we watched the episode of the Magic School Bus. And what I wanted you to learn from that is when cells are put together, when they work together, they make up a tissue. And we're going to talk about the different types of tissues in a second. So remember, we've spent a lot of time talking about cells and the cell theory and things like that. So to start off with, we have our definitions here in the middle and then our pictures here on the right. So the cell is the smallest unit of life that can do a specific job or function. And then if I have several of the same type of cell put together, that's going to make what's called a tissue. So I'll talk about the types of tissues in a second. And then if I have, several tissues put together, that's going to make an organ. And then several organs put together is an organ system. So it's a group of organs that are working to perform a function. For example, here, the organ that I have here is the kidney. And then the system that it makes up is the urinary system, which is part of the excretory system, getting rid of waste. So you have your kidneys that filter, and then basically tubes that transport the waste to your bladder. And then if I have several organ systems, that's going to make an organism. So the urinary plus the respiratory and the skeletal and the muscular and all of the systems put together are going to make an organism like you or the frog that we are going to dissect. So let's get into the different types of tissues. So muscle tissue is the first one that I want to talk about. And so we have muscle fibers that are going to relax and contract, and that's going to make movement of your body possible. So we have different types of muscle. We have skeletal muscle that is going to be attached to your skeleton to move your bones. We have smooth muscles, like the kind that are in your digestive system that move your food along and digest your food, or the kind of muscles that are in your bladder that keep you from having an accident. And adults are better at that, right? Than babies are. Babies cannot control those muscles yet, which is why they have to wear diapers. Then we have also our cardiac muscles, which are going to be our heart muscles that make our heart pump. Your heart is a muscle. Then we have epithelial tissue, which is going to be basically like a protective layer around things. So this is going to be your skin is epithelial tissue, but you also have epithelial tissue, around organs and things like that. It's like an outer layer that's protecting it. Some of them will also absorb nutrients and filter blood and secrete hormones, meaning release hormones or things like saliva and acid and sweat. But that's your epithelial. It's basically like a skin. So you can think about your outer skin and then like a skin on the inside or the outside of certain organs. Then we have connective tissue. This is going to be things that connect. So these are going to provide structure and support. It's going to provide cushioning for your organs. It also provides for nutrients, storage. And then examples that we have of these are tendons, ligaments, cartilage, which is like in your ear. All of that is considered connective tissue. I think of it as kind of like filling in the blanks in between anything, kind of connecting everything together, bringing it all together. So your whole body works as a system. The connective tissue is going to make that possible. Then we have nervous tissue. So this is going to be part of your nervous system. This includes your brain and all of your nerves that go throughout your body. And they are basically carrying messages all throughout your body. So let's get into The systems. I started with the outside, which is the integumentary system. Integumentary may sound like a really confusing word, but it's basically just your skin. That's the integumentary system. It's also going to include things like your hair, sweat glands, some blood vessels, that are close to the outside that are in your skin, sebaceous glands, which produce oil and make it so that your skin's not super dry. A layer of fat is also going to make up your integumentary system. And this is all about protection. This is protecting your all of your organs. Imagine if we didn't have skin, right? And you bumped into your desk as you were walking into class or something. The skin is actually going to provide an extra layer of protection. It's going to help you regulate body temperature. Your hairs stand up when it's cold, which helps you retain heat. You sweat when it's hot, and that sweat evaporates to help cool you down. So it's a really good way of not just protecting you, but keeping your body at equilibrium, which means it's keeping it at a temperature where it's happy. Your skin is made up of 3 layers. The epidermis is the very outside layer. Then you have the dermis, and then the hypodermis is way down deep. That's kind of like the innermost layer of your skin. Next, we have the skeletal system, and this is going to provide structure for your body. So it's basically giving you your shape, and it helps support you so that you can stand up straight. And it's also offering a layer of protection, especially around some of the most important organs in your body. For example, your skull protects your brain, and your rib cage will protect your heart and your lungs. So it's a really, really important way that your body kind of protects itself, that it protects the most important organs in your body. You have joints where the bones meet, and that's where you bend your elbow or you bend your knee. Those are going to all be joints. And then you have cartilage that's kind of in between those joints that makes them run smoothly. Your bones are also really good for storing fat, minerals, calcium, right? We've heard about how your bones need calcium and you need to drink milk and things like that. So that's for your bones, because that's where the calcium's at. And your bones are also going to be what produce red blood cells for your body. And we'll talk a little bit more about those when we talk about the respiratory system. But basically, those carry oxygen for you. You will be making a model of the skeletal system. And here, what I did was I glued it on blue paper so you could see how I didn't spend a lot of time trying to cut it out perfectly. If you take your time coloring it and doing a really good job staying inside the lines when you color it, you don't have to do as good of a job when you cut it out. And I would rather do that. I think it's a little bit more annoying to try to cut things out perfectly than it is to try to color them perfectly. So here's an example of what yours should look like. Notice how I turn it sideways, and I glued it into my my journal that way. Next, we have the muscular system, which is all about movement. Some movement is voluntary, meaning that you consciously, that you're telling your arm or your hand to pick up the pencil or whatever. And then some of them are involuntary, meaning you do not think about it. Like your heart pumping, it's just always pumping. Your muscles in your digestive system are just always digesting. So those are more involuntary. You don't think about them. And the voluntary ones you have to consciously think about, and you tell them. Your brain sends the message to do those things consciously. We have different types of muscles, which I mentioned. We have smooth muscles that are involuntary, and the way that I remember this is I think you want your muscles, you want your food to go down smoothly. And so you have smooth muscles in your digestive system and also in your bladder. Cardiac muscles are only found in the heart. Your heart is your cardiac muscle. And then you also have skeletal muscles. So these muscles are going to be attached to your bones, and those are going to be voluntary. You move your bones consciously. So let's kind of dive in a little bit more into skeletal, right? Those move your bones. So examples are like your biceps, your quadriceps, your pectoral muscles. Smooth muscles are gonna be in charge of digestion, like your stomach muscles, your bladder muscles. They'll also regulate blood pressure. Your cardiac muscles are going to be found in the heart. And these are the muscles. This is interesting, right? Cardiac muscles will never get tired, which is a good thing. Your nervous system is basically a way that your body sends messages, but these messages are kind of electric messages that go to and sorry about that, my phone. They go to and from your brain. And so, what is happening here is like, let's say you want to pick up your pencil, your brain is going to send a message to your hand to pick up your pencil, or let's say you touch something hot, you accidentally touch like a hot stove or something, your hand is going to send messages to your brain saying, oh my gosh, that's hot, don't touch that. And so you have one of the main parts is the brain, and then you have your spinal cord, which is kind of like, I think of it like Main Street. All the nerves are going to be connected to the spinal cord. And then you have all the peripheral nervous system are the nerves that are outside that. And you have a lot of nerves going everywhere to be able to pick up how things feel. If you're hot, you're cold, if something's smooth or rough, lots and lots of nerves all over your body. I want to mention really quick about the brain and how your brain does have different parts of it. You have the cerebrum, which is what is called like the gray matter of your brain. When you think of a picture of a brain, that's the cerebrum, is the majority part of it. You have the thalamus that's on the inside of that. The brainstem leads down to the spinal cord, and the cerebellum is at the very back of the brain. And just to talk a little bit about what each of these do, the cerebellum is for balance and movement. That's what it's in charge of. Your brainstem regulates breathing, your heartbeat, and digestion. And then of your cerebrum, you have different lobes. The temporal lobe, which are kind of like right by your ears, those are in charge of listening. So that makes sense, right? Your frontal lobe, which is at your forehead, that's actually in charge of emotion and your personality. You have your parietal lobe, which is kind of like, I guess you could say like the crown of your head, at the kind of the top of your head. It's in charge of sensory information, so taste, feel, things like that. And then the occipital lobe is at the back of your head, kind of above your neck, and that's in charge of vision. And if you think about that, that's directly behind your eyes, right? So that's what your occipital lobe is for. And if you are injured in any way in any one of these places, that can affect different things, like your vision or your memory and stuff like that. Onto the circulatory system. This might look really confusing, but basically what the circulatory system is it's all about the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. You breathe in oxygen, right? That's what your body needs. You actually breathe in a lot of different kinds of gases, but what your body needs is the oxygen. And then what you release or expel is carbon dioxide, which is waste. So just like you have other kinds of waste, another type of waste is the breath that you breathe out, which is carbon dioxide. And your circulatory system is the one that delivers all of this oxygen. And so that's basically your heart, your veins, and your arteries. Your heart pumps your blood, and that blood is going to come to your lungs and pick up oxygen, drop off carbon dioxide, and then that blood is going to get transported to and all parts of your body, your brain, your pinky toe, everywhere. So your circulatory system, I think about it as like going round and round and round. Your blood is delivering all of this oxygen to all these different places in your body. Next, you have the respiratory system. The respiratory system is all about breathing, right? Respirar. So basically what's happening here is your respiratory system is working with your circulatory system Your respiratory system is the one that takes in the oxygen and gets rid of the carbon dioxide. And then that oxygen is delivered to your circulatory system. So your respiratory system is composed of the trachea, which is basically a tube that leads to your lungs, which are made of different parts, including the bronchi and the bronchioles and the alveoli. And the alveoli is actually where the exchange happens. So you can see the red has just that has oxygen and is going to deliver it to the rest of the body. That those red arteries are going to be going to the body to drop off oxygen, and the blue veins that you see there in the alveoli are dropping off carbon dioxide to the lungs so that the lungs can expel it when you breathe out. If you look at the person here, you've got the pharynx, which is basically your throat, and your epiglottis, kind of your throat also just a little bit further down, and then your larynx is a little bit lower than that leads to your trachea. And you have your diaphragm at the bottom of your lungs or underneath your lungs. If you take a really deep breath and you feel that kind of muscle stretch, kind of like where your stomach is sort of, that's your diaphragm. It's because of that muscle that you're able to inhale and exhale. So let's look a little bit closer at these parts. We've got our larynx at the top, which is your voice box that leads to your trachea, which is also called your windpipe. And then things branch off from the trachea into the bronchial tubes, which are also called the bronchi. And then those become even smaller branches into the bronchioles. And then that's made up of the entire lungs. Lungs are made up of bronchioles, and basically kind of like the end of the branch there is the alveoli. And so on number 6 right here in the picture, you can see where the exchange is happening. The blue is the carbon dioxide getting dropped off, and the red is picking up the oxygen to deliver it to the rest of your body. And then you have number 7 is the diaphragm, which is the muscle that allows for your lungs to expand and contract as you breathe in and breathe out. Next, the digestive system. So this one's like basically like a long line of different organs that digest your food for you. So the whole point of the digestive system is to break down food into nutrients that your body can use. So let's talk a little bit more about that. To start off with, we're starting on the right-hand side and then moving towards the left. If you look at the numbers at the bottom, you start with your mouth. Your teeth begin mechanical digestion. So that's basically breaking down the food physically, right? We talked about physical and chemical changes, and then your saliva starts to break it down chemically. The enzymes in your saliva break it down. And then the food goes down your esophagus, which is also sometimes called the food tube. So there's a muscle there that pushes your food down to your stomach, and that's called the esophagus, or it's a tube called the esophagus. If you've ever had to take like some medicine that your doctor gave you that was like a really big pill and you could feel it like scraping down the whole way because it was so ginormous, that's your esophagus. You're basically feeling it go down your esophagus. Then it goes to your stomach. The esophagus leads to the stomach, which is it's a muscular sac that's going to churn the food, and it's going to add acids in there to break down the food until it gets to the small intestine. The small intestine will do a little bit of digestion also. In other words, there's some enzymes and things that are going to be added to it here to further break down the food. But the most important thing that happens in the small intestine is there's these little finger-like projections, or they kind of act like sponges, and those are going to absorb the nutrients from your food. So basically, once your food is all broken down, it's the small intestine's job to pick out the good stuff and send it to your body, where whatever cells need it in your body. Then by the time things get to the large intestine, you basically have just a lot of waste and water. So the large intestine's job is going to be to to absorb the water from the waste that you have. Then the rectum is going to store the waste, which is properly called feces, until you feel the urge, and it gets released through the anus from the body. So I kind of mentioned this already, but let's talk about it a little bit more. At the beginning of the year, we talked about physical and chemical change, and this is basically what it is, right? There's just a physical change with digestion and a chemical change with digestion. So instead of calling it physical, we call it mechanical because it's movement, right? Mechanical energy that is breaking down the food. So mechanical digestion is when your food is chewed or churned. And this is going to happen in the mouth and the stomach. Chemical digestion is when we're going to have chemicals added to the food to digest it. So acid, bile, saliva, enzymes are going to do a chemical breakdown of the food. And so this is going to happen in your mouth because of saliva. Your liver is going to release bile and different enzymes are going to be released by the gallbladder, the stomach, and the small intestine. And I'm going to show you a cool interactive video that kind of explains this a little bit better. It shows you a little bit better. On to the excretory system. The excretory system is basically getting rid of waste. So mainly what we want to talk about here is the urinary system, which is part of the excretory system. So excretory is kind of like can be several systems. However, you're getting rid of waste, that's going to be part of the excretory. But one of the main ones is the urinary system. And this has to do with pee. Okay. So your blood has waste in it, and it's your kidney's job to clean out your blood. So your kidneys are basically filters. They filter the waste out of your blood. And then what they do is your kidneys will send that waste down the ureters, which are tubes that lead to your bladder. And then your bladder will store that waste, which is urine, until it's full and you get the urge and you ask your teacher to go to the restroom, and then the waste is going to be expelled through your urethra. Okay, so the important thing here is to remember that kidneys filter your blood, and that waste, which is urine, is going to be processed through the urinary system and then eventually get to your bladder and get expelled. So here's a diagram of what's going on. So the kidneys, you have these things called nephrons, and those are the ones that actually do the filtering in your kidneys. And then ureters are just basically like tubes that they transport. That basically the waste gets transported from the kidneys to the bladder, and then the bladder stores it, and the urethra is just another tube to transport the urine outside of the body. The reproductive system, we pretty much already talked about what we need to know here when we did sexual and asexual reproduction. But we've got two systems here, the male and the female. We have the female that produces the eggs and the male that produces the sperm. Endocrine system, this is another one that has kind of like a weird name that might be hard to remember, but all of this has to do with hormones. Okay. You know how you've heard where people are like, teenagers are, and they're crazy hormones or whatever. This is the endocrine system. You have a lot of different glands that release lots of different types of hormones that are in charge of lots of different things. For example, your thyroid, which is in your throat or neck, is in charge of your energy. Your pituitary gland, also called the boss gland, is in charge of like growth and things like that. So sometimes people like they might have issues with different glands, and so that affects their ability to grow. Things like that. Adrenal glands, which are probably the coolest glands, they sit above your kidneys. Those are the ones that release adrenaline that, like, if you're in like a scary situation and you hear about like, oh, you're going to either fight or flight, right? Your adrenal glands are going to like give you extra strength sometimes if you're in like a life-threatening situation, or it'll give you super speed so you can run away, and things like that. And then we also have glands in your reproductive organs that allow for you to mature. Like we've heard of, boys' voices changing and things like that. That all has to do with the endocrine system and hormones that are released. We're going to watch a video for how the body works that goes over this really well. That'll help you guys understand it. The immune system, super important right now, right? So the immune system is all about protecting you from invaders, and things like that. And so you have lots of ways to do this. Skin, it's one of them, right? You can read this here. We've got white blood cells that are like soldiers that fight off, diseases and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about vaccines, because this is something that's in the news a lot, and how vaccines work. So some vaccines will give you weakened versions of a virus, and so then your body's not going to really be affected by that virus because it's a weakened version, but your white blood cells, which are those like little soldiers in your body, can build up an army against it. So that, let's say if your friend sneezes on you, and they have the flu or whatever, then your body already knows how to fight it. More recently, right, when we're talking about COVID, that's a different kind of vaccine, and it's called an mRNA vaccine, which basically they're injecting you with a code um, that will allow the white blood cells to recognize any future exposure. So they're not injecting you with a weakened version of the virus or anything. Imagine it's like a picture. And that vaccine is showing your immune system, like, hey, this is what the bad guy looks like. It's not the bad guy, but it's what the bad guy looks like. And then your white blood cells are like, okay, let's build up an army to defeat it. And then if you do become exposed to the virus, um, it's not going to be as bad as if you hadn't already started building up an army. So maybe you might get a little sick, but because you had already started to develop what are called antibodies, in other words, an army against that virus, then your body is better able to fight it. Okay. So that's the immune system. Okay, so if you have any questions about anything, please let me know, and I will see you guys in class. Thanks for watching.